Sir, I've told you twice. We have no rooms. Maybe try the hostel on 9th, it's more realistic, I understand. May I speak with your manager, please? I am the manager, a second voice, amused, arriving from the back office. And we're done here, Chief. Then I'd like to speak with your manager's manager. The laughter behind that front desk was loud enough to wake half the lobby. It did not wake the 7-year-old girl asleep on the man's shoulder. And it did not move the man himself, who stood there in a rain-soaked jacket and airport slippers, calm as deep water. Because what nobody at the Beacon Grand knew was that the manager's manager had a manager, and 2 days from now every one of those managers would answer to the quiet Filipino man they were laughing at. Before we go deeper into today's story, type 777 in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If stories about quiet strength and perfectly timed justice move you, like this video and subscribe. You will not want to miss the ending of this one. His name was Danilo Mercado. Most people who did business with him never got past Dan. He was 52 years old, born in Davao, the only son of a cargo ship seaman named Lorenzo Mercado, a man who spent 10 months of every year on the ocean so that his family could spend all 12 on dry land. Danilo grew up measuring his father's love in envelopes and long-distance static, in balikbayan boxes that smelled of other countries. In the 2 months a year when the house was suddenly full of a deep, easy laugh. The night before his final voyage, Lorenzo called his son to the porch. He was quiet for a while, watching the dark water past the harbor lights. Then he pressed something into Danilo's palm. A small brass compass, its glass scratched, its casing worn to a dull shine by 30 years of salt and thumbs. They gave me this on my first ship, he said. It has crossed the ocean more times than I can count. Now it's yours. And then he said the sentence Danilo would carry longer than the compass itself. In rough water, a knock, the captain speaks the softest. Danilo was 19 when the telegram came. His father's heart had stopped somewhere in the South China Sea 4 days from home. The company shipped back a duffel bag and a month's wages. The compass never left Danilo's pocket again. He came to America at 24 with a logistics diploma and a debt. He unloaded trucks at night and studied freight software by day. At 31, he leased one battered box truck and painted Mercado Freight on the door himself, crooked, because he could not afford the sign shop. He was polite to every client, early to every dock, and silent about every insult. The dispatchers who mimicked his accent, the brokers who asked to speak to the actual owner. He did not argue with any of them. He simply took their customers, one honest delivery at a time. 21 years later, Mercado Freight ran 400 trucks and 3 distribution hubs, and Danilo's family office had begun quietly buying the things that moved the world: warehouses, cold storage, a port terminal. And that autumn, after a year of lawyers and signatures, it had closed its largest purchase yet. The struggling parent company of Beacon Hotels, 91 properties, pending one final announcement scheduled for Friday morning. It was Wednesday night. Nobody knew. That was how Danilo preferred everything. His wife, Corazon, had been the only person he ever celebrated with, and Corazon had passed 3 years ago, a stroke, sudden as weather, leaving him a house too quiet and a daughter named Bituin, who everyone called B, 7 years old, missing one front tooth, afraid of thunder and absolutely nothing else. Since then it had been the two of them. He had learned to braid hair from internet videos. She had learned that when Papa held the brass compass, he was thinking of people they loved. That night, their flight home from her Lola's birthday in Cebu was diverted by a storm system that shut half the region's airspace. They landed at the wrong airport at 11:20 p.m. in sideways rain with no luggage, no car, and a little girl who had finally, mercifully fallen asleep against his neck. Every airport hotel was chaos. The Beacon Grand was 4 minutes away. Danilo walked into its lobby at midnight in a soaked jacket and the airline slippers they hand out when your shoes are in a suitcase in another city, carrying his sleeping daughter and her small backpack shaped like a turtle. Behind the desk stood a clerk named Brittany Cole, 26, lip gloss immaculate, patience expired. She watched him cross the marble and made her decision somewhere around his slippers. "We're full," she said before he reached the desk. "Good evening," Danilo said. "The storm diverted our flight. Anything at all, my daughter is asleep." Brittany began speaking slowly and loudly, the way some people talk to the foreign and the poor, as if volume were a translation service. "No rooms, full hotel. Do you understand?" She slid a flyer across the marble. "The hostel on 9th takes cash. It's more realistic for you." Behind her at the night audit station, a young woman named Nur Haddad looked up from her screen. On that screen, plainly visible to anyone on the staff side of the desk, the availability grid showed 14 open rooms. Nur said nothing. She had said nothing for 8 months, but her hand moved quietly to her keyboard and she took a screenshot, the way she had taken 41 screenshots before. Danilo glanced at the flyer. He did not touch it. Bee sighed in her sleep and he adjusted her weight and made his voice even softer, because there is a kind of man who lowers his voice exactly when other men would raise it. "I understand," he said. "May I speak with your manager, please?" The back office door opened and produced Rick Halloran, night manager 44, a man who had learned early that a lobby at midnight is a small kingdom and had never once questioned who its king was. He took in the slippers, the wet jacket, the brown face, the sleeping child, and smiled the smile of a bouncer. "I am the manager. She's told you we're full. We're done here, Chief." Then the doors blew open on a gust of rain, and a red-faced businessman came in with no reservation and a platinum voice, and Rick himself walked him through check-in in 4 minutes flat, upgrading him to a king suite for the trouble of the storm. The man passed Danilo without seeing him at all. Danilo watched the entire transaction. Then he turned back to the desk, unhurried. "You just checked in a walk-in," he said quietly. "Cancellation," Rick said, bored, "just popped up." "Amazing timing, huh?" Brittany laughed. She picked up her phone, thumbed something into the staff group chat, a photo of the man in slippers captioned, "The record would later show, guy in chanclas demanding to see the CEO Mau," and set the phone face down, still smiling. "Then I'd like to speak with your manager's manager," Danilo said. That was when the laughter really arrived. Rick actually leaned on the counter to enjoy it. "My manager's manager. Buddy, that's the regional director. She runs 40 hotels. She is asleep, she does not come down at midnight, and she definitely does not come down for you. This isn't a call center. There's no escalation button." He snapped his fingers twice toward the doors. "The rain's that way." Danilo stood very still for a moment. He thought about his father standing on the deck of other people's ships for 30 years, calling men sir who never learned his name. He thought about Friday morning. He thought about the small weight breathing against his neck, and about what she would see if she woke right now, and what he wanted her to see instead someday when he told her this story. He carried Bee to the bench by the window, sat her gently against his chest, and took the brass compass from his pocket. He folded her small fingers around it, the way his father had once folded his. "So we're never lost, Anak," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. Then he took out his phone. He did not open the acquisition folder. He did not pull up the lawyers. He scrolled to a contact saved 3 months ago during due diligence, a number its owner had said, in the way executives say things they never expect to be tested. "Call me any hour, Dan, I mean it." Sandra Whitfield, chief executive of Beacon Hotels, answered on the second ring because she was awake, because storm nights are chaos, and because some part of her had spent 3 months waiting to prove that sentence true. "Dan? Is everything all right? We're still on for Friday." "Sandra," Danilo said softly, watching the desk. "I'm in the lobby of your Beacon Grand by the airport. My daughter and I were diverted by the storm. Your night team has told me 3 times there are no rooms. I've watched 2 walk-ins check in while I stood here." A pause, calm as a harbor. "I asked for the manager's manager. I was told she doesn't come down for people like me. I'd like you to come see your hotel, Sandra, not Friday." Now there was a silence on the line of a very specific temperature. 20 minutes, Sandra Whitfield said. She made it in 17. The CEO of 981 Hotels came through the doors of the Beacon Grand at 12:51 a.m. in a raincoat over pajamas, hair wet, heels loud on the marble, and the lobby did the thing rooms do when they realize the walls have been listening. Rick straightened so fast his lanyard swung. Brittany's face performed a rapid search for context and found nothing. "Ms. Whitfield?" Rick managed. "We weren't expecting." She walked past him. She walked to the bench by the window, stopped in front of the tired man in airline slippers holding a sleeping girl, and did something no one behind that desk could file anywhere. "Mr. Mercado," she said, "I am so deeply sorry." "Sir," nobody moved. "Sandra," Danilo said gently, "thank you for coming." She turned to face her night team and her voice had Friday morning in it. "Since introductions apparently matter here, this is Danilo Mercado. On Friday it becomes public that his family's group has acquired this company. Every Beacon property, every desk, every badge. She let that arrive at its own speed. You told the incoming owner of this hotel to try the hostel on 9th, while 14 rooms sat open. I've already pulled night's grid from my phone in the car." Brittany made a sound. "Rick found a sentence, sir. If we had known who you—" "You're right," Danilo said, and stood, slowly, Bee still against his shoulder. His voice stayed at the volume of a sleeping child, and the entire lobby leaned in to receive it. "You had no way of knowing who I was. That is the whole test. You didn't fail the owner tonight. You failed a wet stranger in slippers with a little girl. My father crossed oceans for 30 years being treated the way you treated me, and he taught me exactly one thing about nights like this." He looked from Rick to Brittany, unhurried, in rough water. The captain speaks the softest. "You both spent tonight shouting. That told me everything before Sandra's car ever left her driveway. It was Noor who stepped forward then, Noor Haddad, night auditor, 8 months of silence ending in one motion as she turned her monitor to face the room. "Miss Whitfield, before decisions get made, you should see this. Tonight isn't the first time. Screenshot after screenshot. Dates, timestamps. 14 rooms shown open while guests were refused. A taxi driver in January. A family speaking Spanish in March. An elderly man with a cane in June. Each one coded afterward in the log by Mr. Halloran as no-show risk. 41 times, Noor said. Her voice shook and held. I kept them because I was afraid no one would believe me without proof. I should have sent them months ago. I'm sending them now. The lobby was absolutely silent. Sandra Whitfield read the screen for a long moment. Mr. Halloran, falsifying guest records is fraud, not rudeness. You're terminated tonight and the file goes to HR and legal in the morning. Miss Cole, Brittany had begun to cry. Your termination is also effective tonight. Sandra, Danilo's voice, soft, one amendment if the new owner may. He looked at Brittany, not unkindly. Miss Cole followed the weather in this lobby instead of checking her own heading. That's a failure of courage before character. Offer her one path back. 90 days retraining, starting in housekeeping, reporting to whoever runs this desk next. If she takes it and earns it, keep her. People can learn. My father believed that about entire crews. Brittany stared at him. Why would you do that for me? Because someone once gave my father a first ship, Danilo said, when his slippers looked just like mine. And the desk, Sandra said, needs a new head of night operations. She looked at Noor. 41 screenshots says you've been doing the job's conscience for free. Effective tonight, you're doing the rest of it for a title and a raise. That was when a small voice arrived from the bench, blinking into the light, one fist outstretched. Papa, your compass. B held it up to him, solemn as a ship's officer. Are we still lost? Danilo took the worn brass from his daughter's hand and closed his fingers around 30 years of ocean. No, Anak, he said. We were never lost. We just hadn't gotten there yet. They slept that night in a standard room with 2 beds, because that is what he asked for, to Sandra's despair. On Friday morning the announcement ran and the staff group chat, the record would show, went silent for a very long time under a photograph of a man in chunkless. In the year that followed, every Beacon hotel adopted what employees now call the slipper test, unannounced midnight visits. At every property, by tired-looking strangers whose reports go straight to the chairman's office. The first 3 properties that failed learned quickly that the test had teeth. Noor Haddad runs night operations for the whole airport region now and trains every new auditor with a slideshow that opens on screenshot number 1. Brittany Cole finished her 90 days, then asked to stay in housekeeping another 90, and today wears a supervisor badge she says she finally deserves. Rick Halloran drives for a rideshare company and is, by all accounts, very polite after midnight. And in the chairman's office of Mercado Holdings, on a shelf with no trophies, sits a small brass compass with a scratched glass, pointed. B checks it every visit, exactly where it should be. Before I end this story, I'd like to leave you with this. The world believes power is proven by how loudly you can refuse someone. But Danilo Mercado proved what a seaman taught his son on a porch in Davao. The person speaking softest in the storm is usually the one who knows where the ship is going. The truth is, every no you give a stranger is a report you file about yourself, and you never know who will read it. Character is not what you show the guests in suits. It is what you hand the man in slippers. So the next time life puts a tired stranger in front of you, before you decide what they are, Remember whose test you might be taking, and whatever the weather in the room, be the one who speaks the softest. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.